Welcome to the Goddesses of Social Work podcast, hosted by Renita Ray Davis, licensed clinical social worker, board-approved social work clinical supervisor, and facilitator of the Goddesses of Social Work supervision community. Join us as we travel through the social work journeys told by the Goddesses of Social Work community members, past and present, as they make their way toward clinical licensure.
Welcome back to the Goddesses of Social Work podcast, where we have honest conversations about social work, the people who do this work, and the many different ways this profession can take shape. I'm your host, Renita Ray Davis, and this summer I had the pleasure of attending the Harlem Fine Arts Show in the Hamptons, and that's where I met today's guest, Morgan Overton. As one of the featured artists and speakers at the Harlem Fine Arts Show, her exhibit was exquisite. Morgan is a social worker and multidisciplinary visual artist whose work explores Black interiority, ancestral memory, and the fullness of Black life beyond narratives of struggle. Her journey has also included psychology, community organizing, politics, education, and so much more. When I learned that the artist I had met that day was also a social worker, of course, I was super excited because so much of what we explore here on the Goddesses of Social Work podcast is the expansiveness of this profession, the different ways we practice, the different parts of ourselves we bring to the work, and what becomes possible when we allow those parts of ourselves to exist together. So, Morgan, welcome to the Goddesses of Social Work podcast. I'm really glad we get to continue the conversation. Rather than me telling everyone who you are, I love to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I just love art events because you get to meet your people. And here in Pittsburgh, we always feel like we're 1 degree separated from social workers. Um, but yeah, you beautifully talked about my story in a concise way, but I'm a born and raised Pittsburgher, a fifth generation Pittsburgher. Sometimes I sound like it, sometimes I don't. Um, and I think the through line of my personal and professional career has been the human condition. I am an only child whose parents threw everything at me just to see what would naturally stick, and everything stuck. I was Velcro. I was like, sure, I'll do ballet. Sure, I'll play the flute and piano and art and I'm really grateful that they allowed me to be expansive because I think it led to where I am now, how I do my art, how I put my energy out into the world. And so, visual art has always been the thing since day one. Both of my parents are creative. And so, um, you know, as a young person, you're trying to figure out, like, okay, how do I focus? What am I going to be interested in? I've always been enamored by the brain, thanks to being a PBS kid here in Pittsburgh. Would always just watch those science specials and loved learning about how we come to be in this world, which led me to study psychology at the University of Pittsburgh. And I minored in art because I didn't want to lose that part of myself. And then I ended up working in a cognitive neuroscience lab at Boston Children's Hospital, Harvard Medical School for 2 years. And I quickly realized I felt more purposeful being with people. When I was an undergrad, I worked on the Obama campaign. I worked on different community organizing initiatives. And little did I know that the thing that was always on the side or whatever I did outside of class actually ended up being on the forefront of who I was. So I kind of felt a disconnect between people and systemic change being in a research lab. And, that's a whole other conversation. And so then I was like, what graduate program focuses on social justice? And lo and behold, Pitt School of Social Work was the first thing that came up. And I'm like, social work. Oh my God. I was so ignorant. I'm like, what is this? And lo and behold, the whole purpose and soul of social work is to be the helpers that Mr. Rogers talks about. So came back home from a master's in social work for a focus in community organizing and social action. And I graduated right when COVID started. I don't wish that on anybody. But, that point in time taught me how much social workers are needed. But during that time, I really became more involved with understanding systems, people, even though on surface I was a macro social worker, and they tend to kind of divide micro social work with macro social work, and it's like, nah, you need both. So I really became so in love with public policy and got more involved in politics. I ended up becoming elected as the first Black woman vice chair of the Allegheny County Democratic Party. And so all of these things have coexisted together, and it has deeply informed my artistic practice, which I will definitely get into. But if y'all don't take anything from this conversation, know that it's okay to pivot. It's okay to be layered. It's okay to be lasagna. We can't be bland out here. And I don't regret anything throughout my journey.
I love that, Morgan. There was so much there. I took so many notes. Can
Yeah, I'm
I?
sure.
But I loved it. I want to go back to something because I just the episode right before yours with Tori, we were talking. She used this phrase, and I'm sure it's not a phrase from her, but it's the first time I had heard it. Hobby maxing, and she was using it as in just trying all the hobbies and seeing what sticks. And so
Yeah.
the fact that you said your parents like just threw everything at you
Yeah.
to see
Yeah.
what stuck, I was like, oh wow, those two things coming together. But
Yes.
I think there's something there. And I would like to lean into that just for a moment
Mm,
because I think we make a lot of social workers have made social work a big part of the pie of their life. And
mm,
social work is actually just a very small part
mm.
of your life. And so not allowing themselves to explore other ideas and interests and hobbies. And like you said, your parents throwing all the different types of skills at you. What
Yeah.
what did that do for you? The fact that even as a young person, you were
Mm.
allowed to explore so many different interests and hobbies.
Ooh, it's almost easy to take that sort of rearing for granted because, in my point of view, I was just allowed to be me. And in getting to know so many people and their stories, they unfortunately didn't have that sort of childhood or ability to really spread their wings. And it just has me exist in a state of gratitude all the time because there was never a point in time where I felt like I had to shrink myself or apologize for being an artist and someone interested in neuroscience, or oh, you didn't get a PhD? Well, you're gonna fail at life, or being an artist is a non-viable career path, or a social worker, y'all don't get paid. I didn't allow any of that external noise penetrate my mental because I had that shield of a support system around me, but they did everything they could to make sure that I had my own shield within. So, it's something that I do take a pause sometimes to realize, like, wow, thank you. I tell my parents all the time, thank you, because it makes a huge difference. But there's so many people out here who don't have that circumstance and they still find their way, they still carve a path, which should also be acknowledged as well.
Absolutely. And I hope what this part of the conversation that we're just kind of giving people because part of what we're going to get into is
Mm,
that all the different ways you brought yourself together.
mm,
But I hope part of this conversation is to give people permission that it is okay to explore other interests.
mhm,
And that it expands your mind and your horizon. And
mhm,
speaking, well, I was gonna go one way, but I want to come back to another thing. I'm still gonna go backwards a little. One of the things that I love that you said was that in traditional social work, schooling and teach
Yeah.
in the academia world anyway.
Mhm.
I have witnessed, I'm not saying it's everywhere, but I have witnessed that great divide
Mhm.
between macro social work and micro social work. The individual one-on-one with the client, and then the macro work of even the research and all that. When you said that's a story for another day, it is.
Yeah.
But I do like that you kind of brought it in, because I think that there has to be, even if we just briefly do it here, why do you think it's so important? Because I believe it is, that we have both the macro and the micro, and how do those two influence each other? Because they do.
Mhm. Whew, we are in such a binary society. It's either or, and it's never yes and. Um, and I think I organically saw how micro and macro are bidirectional through my field placements here in Pittsburgh because my first year I was a Center on Race and Social Problems fellow, of course at Pitt, and I was placed at a local elementary school. And, on the surface, we were considered school social workers, which is very much so micro from a layman's perspective, right? You have your client, which are the kids, and you're addressing behavioral issues. But as someone who wants to understand the why of how this person is in this circumstance, you have to understand the systems at place. And so, social determinants of health and the education system and just disinvestment in Black communities and just all of these big umbrellas that lead to the raindrops, right? And so that was just my first year. My second year was in a local state representative's office. And often constituents would come in to the state rep's office because it was their last hope, with their housing issues. And so you have this one singular person that has a multitude of issues that's not because of them as a person, it's because of the systems that failed them. And so that's what led me to fall in love with public policy because I believe it's, the fiber, the unseen fiber that is really constructing this landscape that we call America, right? And so um, the person in the system, it's one and the same, especially in the context of this country. So I think we're doing ourselves a disservice as a field if we continue to have that binary thought when really I think we're the most expansive field out there.
That's a great answer. I love that. I hope people hear it. I hope that
Yes.
people hear we need both the macro and the micro and the meso, obviously,
In the
and
mesa,
that they
right?
all influence each other. And that's what makes social work such the profession that it is, the wonderful, beautiful profession that it is. So
Mhm.
I have two trains of thoughts, and I think they're gonna diverge into each other. I have had the honor of interviewing a bunch of Pittsburgh social workers. I do not know how, but at least six or seven came into my world
Yeah.
last year for the SWAG Award, and Social Worker of Greatness. It's Shanice Nance, the
Mhm.
organizer, and then she allowed and brought in some of these amazing social workers. And one of the things she said was that here in Pittsburgh, you're one social worker away from knowing another
That's
social worker.
exactly right. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and then now I feel I've gotten pulled into the whirlpool, and I love
Yes.
it.
Welcome. You're
Thank
welcome
you.
here.
But one of the things that I was just hearing with your amazing internships that you got to do
Mhm.
was, and I taught in academia for years, and there wasn't I that I can even think of an opportunity. I'm trying to think, but I don't want to, because my ADD brain will go all the way over there. But it's not coming easily. So then there must not have been, even if there was one, an opportunity for the social work MSWs that I taught to go into a Democratic Party and that be their
Mhm.
internship.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I'm just thinking about the Pittsburgh social work landscape
Yeah.
And then how that led you, if you want to first talk about that, and then how that led you to being an elected official.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's what made me, first of all, Pitt is home for me. Um, but it's one of the few schools in the country that has a community organizing and social action practice. And so that is what sealed the deal for me. Um, and we're a small town, we all kind of are influenced in one way or another. We're 1 degree separated from each other in multiple ways, whether we're cousins or social workers, or the work that you're doing influences one another in some sort of way. So it was only natural that, especially for COSA, that's the acronym for, my concentration, that we had those macro-centric placements. But like I said, politics was a bug that bit me early on. Again, I grew up in a very conscious household. Um, I remember getting in arguments in elementary school when George Bush was running, and it's like, who does that as a child? I worked on the Obama campaign, and Barack Obama's presidency and his whole story is truly what opened my world to what's possible as a Black person fighting for democracy. And so, after working on his reelection campaign, I joined the Pitt College Democrats, which led me to intern for a local city councilman, which led me, and it's interesting how these things sort of organically build on each other. But I'm always that person that seeks for what's beyond and not what's right in front of me. I built sort of organic relationships with these folks, and it's not like Pitt was like, here's an internship in city council. I was just like, hey, I'm entering sophomore year. I would love to intern for you. And that was my taste of local government. Then I became a little bit more involved in organizing movements like Fight for 15, which we're still doing for minimum wage. Um, Black Lives Matter. And so, um, once I came back for graduate school and got more involved in public policy, that's when I started to develop relationships with, of course, elected officials. And then, uh, the young Democrats of Allegheny County were led by friends of mine from the Obama campaign and from my Pitt College Dems days. And they were like, Morgan, we would love for you to run for secretary. And I'm like, sure. So over COVID, we're trying to galvanize young people for elections and voting and civic engagement. And then there was a municipal election year where we were voting for judges and sort of the non-sexy races, but they still matter. And I gave a speech as then the president of the Young Democrats of Allegheny County. I was the first Black person to ever be in that position. And we had done a lot of work to get people activated during COVID, and just we've been on Zoom like crazy during that time. And we had a big old mobilization at a local park, and I gave a speech, and I guess everybody was like, oh my God, who's this girl? And I was then asked to run as vice chair of the county Democratic Party. Um, and the rest is history. So I was elected at the ripe old age of 28 in 2022 and had that up until after Kamala Harris lost the 2024 election. So what a time.
That's so amazing.
Thank you.
And in fact, when I was listening to you at the Harlem Fine Arts Show, you said you were the first Black female elected. Can you speak to that just because I want to make sure we put that out there? Yeah.
Yeah. Woo! Yes. So my counterpart at the time, the chairman, he was very intentional to ensure that the vice chair represented Allegheny County, a Black woman. He wanted a Black woman who was progressive from Allegheny County. And I checked all of those boxes. And my whole thing was it wasn't even about, oh, I get to have this role and this title. My thing was, I want to uplift the legacies of John Lewis, Fannie Lou Hamer, Stokely Carmichael, Dr. King, Malcolm X. I'm carrying all of these ancestors with me because as someone who's grown up in Pittsburgh all my life, I wanted a representative party. I wanted to feel as though I was part of this ongoing story of, Black political power in this country, but also here in Pittsburgh. And so I am always like, how can I be the person that I wish I had in whatever phase of life I was in, whether it's when I was at Pitt or, in an internship or just always the person trying to figure it out. And, my dad always says a person can serve as a door. So, how can I be a door and not a gate? So, that was really my vantage point of being vice chair in the party, making sure that we're working with especially young voters and civic minds and people who um, aren't infused by politics or parties, right? Because I mean, they have a right, and that's something we need to be honest about. So just making space for that and ensuring that their voices are part of this ongoing experiment. And that's how we have a more representative party, democracy. So, going into it, I knew Rome wasn't built in a day, but we have to make sure we set a good foundation. So, that was the mindset that I had as a social worker going into political leadership.
And I want to ask a question. I usually don't ask this until the end, and I am going to ask a similar question, but this is a little separate from that. I have a few social workers who've been doing micro, either in the hospital settings or in
Yeah.
the prison settings, and they're seeing the injustices in these settings for people that they're serving on a micro level. And they have been talking about wanting to go into the political arena. And I'm wondering, what advice would you have for those social workers who didn't have that in sophomore year or had that parental
Yeah.
guidance to know, oh, I could have already begun this journey, um,
Mhm.
but have been doing the work for a long time, maybe a decade or so, and like I know that I need to serve on a larger scale. What
Yeah.
advice maybe would you have for those folks?
Well, I love that anybody would have that hunger that they could do more and they know that they have a role to play. Um, and I wholeheartedly agree that we need more practitioners as elected officials because you are on the ground, you are working alongside people with lived experience. And so you, of anyone, understands where systems may fail. And it's not rocket science. That's the thing that always kind of baffles me about being in that sort of field is that we don't have to make this overcomplicated. But there are folks like Representative Lauren Underwood, who I believe was a nurse, and now she's a congressperson, right? So um, I say absolutely go for it. We need more of that. I'm here for social workers being in elected office, nurses, teachers, people who are frontline public servants. I mean, being in politics is a public servant. So I say go for it wholeheartedly.
And I love that. And we sometimes forget that's social work.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
still absolutely social work, even if you're elected.
Right.
It's still social work. I'm going to
Mhm.
pivot us a little bit because I could get lost in that. Uh, and ask this next question. What does, you said your bio work says you center Black interiority. I'd never
Mhm.
heard that phrase before. And so I'm curious, what does that mean to you? And why is it important? Because we're about to get into your artwork now, because that's how I met you at an art
Right.
exhibit. And so, why is it important for you to make it visible through your artwork?
Mm. So I guess I'll back up a little bit. Um, when I started doing portraiture, I began with painting a lot of the freedom fighters that I just listed like 5 minutes ago, James Baldwin, Angela Davis. And then it evolved into just showcasing Blackness as just strong, resilient um, beings in the face of oppression. And then as time went on, and I think mirroring my own journey as someone who's always been on the front lines, addressing systems. I also didn't mention that I used to work in Black maternal health advocacy, which is another sort of micro and macro intersection. Um, and just being a scholar of history and witnessing and also existing in always striving, always fighting, just always never in a state of rest. And when I say rest, it doesn't mean doing absolutely nothing. It means just being able to be. And when I took a step back from politics for my own mental health, to be more in an alignment with my values, to be more in alignment with my purpose, my art also sort of took that turn as well. How do I want Blackness to be um, portrayed? My work has always been a rebuke against that harmful imagery of the dehumanization of Black people, throughout Jim Crow and all of that we see. But I'm like, what would it be to see us just in our pure sacred humanity, where we are just taking a breath, where we can actually just reach the mountaintop that Dr. King spoke of, right? And that's when I realized I don't have to put all of my hats to the side or apart. I studied psychology, which is understanding the internal world, our brains, our minds, our behavior. I worked in politics and community organizing, which is understanding the systems at play that influence our minds, our behaviors, our mental health. And then I'm an artist, and I believe art is truly that window to what's possible. So, with that said, interiority is employing psychology principles of our inner life. That's literally what it means, our interior. When we're with ourselves, our selfhood, our thoughts, being able to daydream, how we situate ourselves as a person when we're in this exterior world. And so I think for the last 2 years, I've really been able to hone in on, my why as an artist. I want my work to serve as a manifestation of Black sacred humanity, where we are not fighting. We get to put our capes up. We get to be at peace. We get to exist in our wholeness, and the fight or flight isn't activated. Our nervous systems are regulated. And it's almost a form of Afrofuturism too, because it's like my hope for us in, the year 3008, but it's like my hope for us today, tomorrow, you know what I mean? So, it's also an ode to our ancestors. I think maybe their wildest dream was just to dream. It was just to sit down, was to be able to hear the breeze. And so when people encounter my work, I want them to be able to see themselves. It's rooted in the Black experience, but I've had countless people of all backgrounds who are moved to tears because they think of their grandma or their own story. And so there's kind of like a universality in my work, but it's just at its core about our humanity as Black people.
Such a beautiful answer. And I'm having this curiosity because I love that you said you're a scholar of history, and it sounds like you're a scholar of Black history. And
Yeah.
so, with the people that you name, like James Baldwin, I don't know if you name Maya Angelou, but we're just going to put her in there as well. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm wondering, as a scholar of Black history, I'm assuming you probably read their bios and narratives and so many other pieces of their. Did you see there? Were you able to pick up on those things that you were speaking of? And that is why you're able to, because all we do see is that mostly is the outward expression of their work. But as a scholar of their work, were you able to be like, there it is? There,
Hmm.
yeah, would you want to speak to that?
I think it's in its totality,
Yeah.
just seeing the arc of Black history in the context of America, right? I mean, I just yesterday watched PBS's documentary on W.E.B. Du Bois. And I mean, he lived to be in his 90s, but through those 90 years, you see a whole continuum of the Black experience. And I just was left feeling infuriated, feeling inspired because he himself was an Afrofuturist, right? Um, and we need truth tellers like Baldwin and Nina Simone and Toni Morrison, who all used their platforms of the arts, of literature, of song to express this sorrow, to put a mirror to America's face, and to also talk about what's possible. And so I would hope that my work is a continuation of what they've left us. Um, and just a visual representation of what it could be if they didn't have to experience such just trials and tribulations and triumphs too, right? So I think it's important to consider all of that context. I'm not dismissing or denying any of the truth. I think I'm using the truth as, well, let's look at under the rock and see maybe it can actually be a geode and it's actually pretty beautiful and we can make something anew and it doesn't have to be in this context of what we've been given, right?
That's a great answer, and it is a great segue into my next question, actually.
Hmm.
And um, I am a tarot lover. I just love tarot.
Yeah.
And so then, what I heard was the tower,
Mhm.
right? And then after the tower is the star.
Mm.
And I think that's what you focus on is the star. And so in my brain thinking about it in that context, your work intentionally resists narratives that confine Black life to just the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And so that also then makes me think about, our profession of social work, but
Mm-hmm.
how we sometimes understand people through their struggles and how we understand our profession through its struggle. And so
Mm-hmm.
I guess the question is, what do you think becomes possible, that star energy? What do you think becomes possible when struggle is no longer the center of the story?
Mm. Ooh.
Hmm.
Hmm. I just think of all of the Black greats throughout history who we've come to know. I think of how many obstacles many of them have faced and the names that we don't know of greatness that existed and they just couldn't fly because this country put them in a dungeon, literally and metaphorically, right? And I wonder, because of how we are as humans, we've evolved to always be on the lookout for threats, right? Like that's how we've survived over time. But what if we don't have to? What if we don't have a threat of white supremacy or oppression or the state or systems or police or just any of these isms that come at us relentlessly. Um, and a lot of people aren't afforded that freedom. I mean, even just in the day to day of just navigating putting food on the table and affordability in this country. And you probably have incredible poets out here or musicians, or even if they're not creatively inclined, they might be gifted at bringing people together, just something that pours into community and connection and togetherness. And they're not able to because they're just trying to survive. Like they probably have so many ideas and they're just not able to simply because they're trying to get from point A to point B. And it's almost by design because when you have people who are able to exist in their fullness and their expansiveness, we wouldn't have a lot of the problems that we do. So, I think, as social workers, it's our mandate to help people become activated in their power. Like we don't have to empower, people already have it. But we're the ones who knock down the doors in the bricks of these systems so people have a little bit easier of a path to walk forward. But sometimes we can even get caught up in those systems too.
And I think social work as a profession, the narrative of social work as a profession has kind of gotten caught up in
Hmm.
it. And I say that in this way. One, when I met you, and I was like, and you had this incredible exhibit, and the artwork that you were showing was, huge and large. And then I heard you with the panel discussion. All I was just thinking about, because I have the honor of supervising this a beautiful community of social workers,
Hmm.
and my platform, or my soapbox that I stand on, is that you can do both. You can
Yeah.
bring the thing that you're really passionate about, the thing that you're really good at,
Hmm.
and do social work. But social work has just kind of been like, this is the thing that you're doing. But
Hmm.
within that thing that you're doing, and I don't mean this in any kind of disrespectful way, but the evidence-based way of doing social work, right?
Hmm.
Um, we kind of now, the narrative is social workers don't make a lot of money, or social workers only take people's kids, or, it's just this profession of
Yeah.
struggle,
Yeah.
seriously,
Absolutely.
right? And so then meeting you, it is, oh, and also having my own soapbox of, we can change the face and the narrative of social work by doing all these, seeing what sticks,
Hmm.
that seeing what sticks energy,
Hmm.
and incorporating it into what social work could
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. And even if I'm not in a clinical practice, even if I'm not doing a typical social work title, I'm still a social worker.
Mhm.
Social work is all throughout my art. It's an extension of it. I've had people ask, are you still going to be involved in politics? My work is a form of politics, We get so caught up in kind of what society has fed us as like the acceptable thing, and it's like why not see it as a prism? It could be on all sides. And I've found that people are really enamored by their job titles. Like it is their identity. And I'm one of the 300,000 Black women who've been laid off last year. And I still have been a full human being. I've still been a social worker. I've still been an artist. I've still been fully Morgan without a certain job title, right? And so
Mhm.
I thought COVID was going to be that lesson for us that, maybe we shouldn't define ourselves by the arbitrary things. Maybe we should lean into our humanity a little bit, but I was wrong.
We have to learn things twice, apparently.
Oh, goodness.
I love that. And that's such a good segue, because you earned your MSW with a focus on community organizing and social action, right? And
Mhm.
so, I'm kind of getting in the weeds of that 30,000-foot view you just gave us. Where do you see those social work values showing up in the art you create today?
Ooh, oh my goodness. It almost is like, it kind of reminds me of like when someone says, "What's your love language?" And it's like, you gotta choose one. All of them. All of them. So it's the same thing with social work values. Like the human, now I can't name all of them right off the top of my head. It's been a while, but humanity, having dignity and regard for one another. Yeah. I'm not going to choose that over something else. I think social work allows us to take a step back and be like, we all have something a little bit more in common than we think. And we're in a very divisive time right now. And I think for me, like I said, I allow the personal to be universal. So those values creep up in and out of my work, whether it comes to the concept development of the work itself, how I want it to land, how I create it, to how it's exhibited, and how people experience it. It's all my work is a form of public service because I'm creating it, which is, an individualistic act, but sharing it with the community is just an art itself.
I absolutely know. I That was such a great answer. And I love that you didn't let me box you in. That was such a great answer because it's absolutely the truth. And
Yeah.
as I am thinking, why did I even ask that question? Because that is exactly how I feel. That
Mhm.
it all of the values of social work, whatever work you're doing, is
Yeah,
infused in, and sometimes one might pop up a little bit stronger than
exactly.
the other, but really all of the values of social work is in the work which then leads me to my next question and that soapbox and why I was so excited to talk to you to begin with. Because I mean, Morgan got my full blown enthusiasm. I probably scared her because I was like, "Oh my
Mm-mm.
God, you're a social
I
worker
love it.
and an artist." I was just
Yes.
like, "This is what I talk about all the
Oh,
time," and people think that it's impossible to do this thing, right? And you're doing it, and you're doing it so beautifully. And I didn't realize you were one of the 300,000 women. And so even bringing that into how I just saw that in my brain. I'm not saying this was your story, but sometimes we got to be released from some things
I agree.
in order, I know that's my story, in order to be able to be like, okay, you have this foundation. It's
Yeah.
great. We just talked about all the things that you've learned,
Yeah.
how social work values are infused in everything you do. It's in how you live, how you breathe. It's your one of your value systems. And
Mm-hmm.
then now you don't have the title of
Mm-hmm.
whatever the organization wanted to give you,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you're still a social worker, you're still an artist. And one of the things
Yeah.
you talked about a minute ago, which is why I wanted to have this conversation, is not fragmenting yourself from the politics that you work so hard
Yeah.
for, the social work that you embody, the
Mm-hmm.
artist that you are and have always been since you were a little one. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it is like how, because for me, the work, the thing that I was passionate about was sitting over here, and social work was all and I didn't know how. I kept
Yeah.
just praying, God, help me to bring these things together. And then one day I woke up and I was like, oh, they are.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen for you? If that's the question, I don't even know if that's the
Mm-hmm.
question, but like,
I hear
how did
you.
that happen for you?
Like, how did it all come together?
Yeah.
Well, I will say it's interesting you said how when you're released from something, you're catapulted to what's more aligned for you. And that's what happened for me. I last year was a resident artist at the School of Visual Arts in New York, which was such a transformative experience for me because I had a month of just time to pour into creating the piece that's on my business card that you have and was also on exhibit at the Harlem Fine Arts Show. And I guess that was a form of interiority, of being able to just go inward and figure out, like, I have all of these different layers and strings of my life. How can I have this watercolor, this graphite, this piece of paper represent that story? And so having that opportunity to do that allowed me the freedom and the permission to allow what's been bubbling under the surface to finally just become a beautiful baked good. You know what I mean? Like, I was able to just be. And since then, I'm a wholehearted believer of what is for you will flow to you. If you have to force it, it's a no. And I've found that since I've leaned into my artistic practice and having those eureka moments come to me, and sometimes it comes in the most obscure ways. Like, I'll just be seeing a little kid and a mom walk down the street, and I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm gonna paint. That's the moment, like allowing life to give me inspiration. I think that has been the beauty of it, of not having all of that external noise. And that goes back to my earlier point, when people are in survival mode and the noise is just all they hear. Meanwhile, the birds are tweeting over here, the voices of the ancestors and their divine purpose is over here, and they may not be able to hear it. So I've been able to get my senses all aligned over this past year, which led me to be at the Harlem Fine Arts Show, which led me to meet you, right? So it's life is something.
Life is beautiful, and
Good.
I love that. And there's two threads I wanna, and maybe we'll see which one gets picked up, which we'll see which one sticks. I
Okay.
hope both of them, because I love. But earlier in our conversation, it was really in the beginning. You were like, "Oh, you don't have your doctorate, and you're
Oh
gonna,
yeah.
all that other stuff." And
Mhm.
like I said, I have this amazing honor of being able to supervise some top tier social workers, like, I mean, a whole community. And they
Yeah,
are, like checkbox, checkbox,
I love it.
checkbox, you know.
Good.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, we love it. But, well, and I literally had this conversation yesterday. Sometimes we try to force that thing.
Mm,
So one of the people I talked to yesterday, trying to force the DSW in this
mm,
educational system landscape that we're in, as far as what social work is and all that other stuff. And
mhm,
one of the things that I was saying to her, was you hadn't even given an opportunity for the clinical that you're pursuing with me to do what it wants to do. You know what I mean? And so again, going back to that, social work could only maybe be 10% of your life, and then the 90% of the rest of your life we're trying to fill up with other things. And I think specifically Black women do that. We're the most highly educated species on this
sure are.
planet. And
Yeah.
why? We're like, why are we pouring our money, our effort, our time, our resources into these academia systems that do not value us?
Yeah.
And if we were to stop thinking that that's the thing, that doctorate over here is
Mm,
the thing, and then allow ourselves to stay open to what God, universe, and our beloved ancestors have a surprise for us, instead of trying to fill up that 90%
mhm.
with these,
Exactly.
accomplishments,
Yeah.
then we can end up at the Harlem Fine Arts Show
Right.
with these amazing pieces, sitting
That's
on a
right.
panel with all these beautiful people listening to every single word you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole podcast episode itself,
It is.
right? Is it given the systems that we're in,
Yeah, yeah,
it's a
yeah,
survival strategy,
it
right? And
is.
it's almost like we have to take as many reins as we can so that we're in positions of power, to be the decision makers. But in our very essence as Black people, especially Black women, we already hold that power. We're just not in a we're not in an environment that sees it or values it. And so much, it's almost like a push and pull, chicken and egg situation. But I think it goes back to the very purpose of my art, which is to just
Mm-hmm.
say, if you are alone with yourself, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
With that self? With just that, if you take off all of the isms and the hats and the I gotta do this, I gotta grind that, I gotta hustle that, if you just take that all away and recognize the divine being that you are by yourself, that is a world within itself. And again, like I said, I feel like it's by design that we're in this gotta go, gotta go, gotta go mode. And it's like I want us to just breathe for a second. My best friend and I, a couple of months ago, we uh we had an event where we just brought Black women together in
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh and they just created bouquets of flowers. And that was it. We had food, we had music, and they just made flowers. Because a lot of these women come together to address systemic issues and fight, 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 get Pittsburgh to get itself together, which is a whole conversation within itself. And it's like, when was the last time you actually had the chance to create something beautiful and you're beautiful and you get to be with
Yeah.
beautiful sisters and there's no
Mm-hmm.
agenda, right? And so I think it all can exist at the same time. We can be realistic
Mm-hmm.
given the circumstances that we're in. You can have your PhD and daydream and not be pressured to answer an email or have to do like we're human doings in this capitalistic society. What about just being, getting back
Yeah.
to our core?
Yeah. I love that. And you know, Morgan, the second thing that I was hoping was sick is exactly what, well, maybe not exactly, but in that same energetic river is I have a Renita theory. I have Renita theories all over the place.
I love
There's a
it.
Renita
Fool
theory.
me. Yes.
And, you know, what if we came into this lifetime and, universe gave us 20 threads that
Hmm.
of healing that we could potentially work on. And one of the things that we do is we think we have to pick up all 20 of them. And I say, what if you just picked up three?
Hmm.
What if you just said, this is what I'm going to focus on healing in
Hmm.
this lifetime, these three. And by adjacent, these other two kind of get some healing too. So then we end up healing five threads in this lifetime. And then the other 15 will come back again and do that one, right? But
Yeah.
it reminds me of the Ten of Wands of trying to pick up all of these things. And so, what if those who do go on and get their PhDs and their doctorates and this, that, and the other, that's one of the threads they decided they were going to pick up on. And so, yes, girl, go do that. But
Yes.
then really know that that's the thread that you're focusing on. And then if there is another, which is maybe I'm going to be an artist in this lifetime, and
Hmm.
I'm going to allow that to heal the
Yeah.
other threads, and that be
Yeah.
okay as well. But
Yeah.
going with, I like that you kept saying, I had to remember my why. I had to remember my why. Why are you doing it? Because of your ego? Or are you doing it because that's one of the threads you said you were going to pick up on in this
Yeah.
lifetime?
I mean, what you're saying is almost like an anti when there's a rotten apple spoiling the whole bunch. But it's like you have this magic healing apple
Mm-hmm,
that
mm-hmm,
begins to heal the rest. And,
mm-hmm.
I think, of course, in our human nature, again, we're trying to always fix and heal and, make sure what harmed us never happens again. We're just always in a state of harm reduction,
Yeah.
just being on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But it's a continuous process. And some people might find healing through, hustling towards something. But it's always an also, it's always an and. And I like to just give people another vantage point. You know, if you feel compelled and called to pursue this incredible accolade, go for it. Yes, we need you, sis.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to grind yourself to the bone. I mean, I often talk about a lot of the female freedom fighters over time, like Fannie Lou Hamer and Octavia Butler, and just so many who didn't get to live to elderhood. And I just, I just imagine a world where we don't have to work ourselves to the bone. And the piece that is on the back of the business card is a representation of my maternal grandmother. She is like a imagined version of what she could have looked like if she lived to elder age. I never got to meet her. And so she kind of represents that of just Black women being able to live and exist in love and also a knowingness and a wisdom, but it doesn't come at a sacrifice or a compromise. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's just my dream. And I think we can make it real just through having conversations like this and having little communal gatherings, because that's our ancestral way. And everything that's happening right now is making us feel like we need to become more isolated, or maybe if I get another degree, I can figure it out. And it's like, yes, and why don't we just sip on some sun tea with each other and make a bouquet of flowers? And it's okay. The world's not going to crash. It's not on us that the world is crashing,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe I have some woo-woo lofty, dreams through my art, but that's why I think it's a form of Afrofuturism.
I love that. And what is your maternal grandmother's name? I always love to honor.
Frances
Mm,
Louise Williams.
she's beautiful.
Thank you. I feel like I'm
This
about
is the only business card on my desk. And when I saw this, obviously I was standing in front of your piece. You weren't in your booth at that
Mhm.
time. Um, and I was just standing in front. It drew me. I was drawn to her. Like you said, so many people are. I love that she has her hand over
Yeah.
her heart and the moon behind her, or the
Yeah.
image. I saw it as a moon.
Yes, you can do
Other people
whatever
can
you
see,
want.
yeah,
Yeah.
whatever they want. Exactly. I was like, let me say it, but whatever that image is for you, but for me, it was the moon, and I was so drawn to her, as I am even now, and that is what made me then go, look, who did this? And I see you had the write up of your bio sitting on your table, and then I was like, oh my God, this is a social worker.
You see how that works, how the universe works? So
Yes,
I love
yeah,
it. That's what I love,
yeah.
organic things like that.
And I made sure that I came back so
Yes.
that I could meet you when you would be in your booth. And then I got to listen to you on your panel, and I was like, please, please come on the
Now look
goddess.
at us. I love it.
But one of the things I remember you said during your panel discussion, Morgan, that we and we're getting close to wrapping up. I have one more question after this. Wasn't a planned question, and then I have one more planned question for you. But you talked about joining the SBA, and then being an artist in residence, and um, but community seems so important. One, for two reasons, just like what we talked about with
Mhm.
you having so much community in Pittsburgh and all of those social workers, knowing you're one person away from knowing a social worker, but you said you had to leave in order for other people, for the masses to experience. If
Mm,
you hadn't left, we wouldn't have been able to
yeah.
experience these beautiful pieces. And so then the importance of community as a foundation, but then also knowing you had to leave, but then also when you left, knowing how important and the intentionality I heard you talk about at the
Mhm.
Harlem Fine Arts Show of cultivating community in the spaces where you were. And can you briefly talk about why that's so important?
Yeah. I mean, first, I mean, the whole theme of another theme someone can take from our conversation is how important it is to spread your wings.
Mm,
You know, butterflies don't fly in a box, and Pittsburgh is my base. It's also not my ceiling.
mm,
I've built beautiful communities here, you know, not just one. And there just comes a point in time when you know I can keep growing. I can keep exploring what this gift I have can give to the world. I'm not leaving Pittsburgh per se, but I'm going to be in New York for a month, which was also a very full circle moment for me because my great-great-grandfather was a well-known baritone and performer here in Pittsburgh, and he moved to Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance and performed in Black theater and stage. And so I felt like I was, you know, walking in his footsteps. And we have a lot of greats here in Pittsburgh who also left, August Wilson and
mm.
Andy Warhol, right? So, you know, I think there's value to spreading your wings, but I'm always making sure I'm bringing it back to what my dad said about being a door and not a gate. So, being in New York allowed me to become a little bit more expansive in my artistic expression. It's allowed me to see things that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten here in Pittsburgh. It's allowed me to meet other like-minded people who I wouldn't have met in Pittsburgh. I've been able to build um, relationships with the faculty who would visit us during our studio visits. And just being able to meet more and more people, not just for the sake of, oh, you got to build your network, but just knowing that you're not alone
Mhm.
is a human need, right? So, building a whole base of friends and community in New York now allows me to have another tether. I'm not abandoning Pittsburgh. I'm able to have people know, hey, you can apply to SVA for this residency. You know, I get to expand opportunity, not just for myself, but for people from Pittsburgh. And so now people can talk about SVA in Pittsburgh, right? So it's like I
Mhm.
get to widen the scope a little bit. That's how I look at it. But community is so necessary, and it tends to be one of those just like surface level Hallmark card words of like community, we need it. But it really is an intentional, needed, and basic human practice that I think we need more than ever. It's a balm right now. So step outside sometimes, y'all. It'll do you some good.
And the fact that you and your best friend cultivated a community of Black women and said, hey, I know that we've been and we are doing, but come and be in community so that you can feel a safe space to rest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was beautiful. It was intergenerational. There were people who never met before meeting each other, which is my favorite thing. And it wasn't rocket science. That just goes back to another thing I said earlier. We just got a bunch of flowers from Trader Joe's and made it available for people. We made it free, so it
Hmm.
was accessible, and the house was packed. And
Wow.
we still reflect on it to this day of I'm so grateful we were able to do that together, but also we were able to offer this to sisters here in Pittsburgh who need something like this.
Yeah. And I think too, 'cause, and I ask that question because sometimes when we are pursuing all of the accomplishments and accolades, we're
Mhm.
doing it in an isolated way. And so when we're intentional about getting into community, we're like, oh, maybe I don't have to do this part because
Mhm.
this girl over here is doing it and I
Yeah.
can my strength is in this and
Yes.
again picking up which threads belong to you
Yes.
because one of completing that circuit of my Renita theory is it reminded me of the here I go with my tarot cards, but it reminded me of the Ten of Wands when we pick up all of the things we think we're supposed to accomplish and or do and or heal. We can't see the direction we're really that alignment I heard you speak of at the Harlem Fine
Yes.
Arts Fair exhibit. that
Mhm.
alignment that we're headed towards because we picked
Right.
up so many other things that maybe don't actually belong to us.
Right. And some things serve a season.
Yeah, that part too.
And it
Mm-hmm.
may have been great. It may have been your shiny wand at the time, but the wand
Mm-hmm.
may have, the light may have gone out. And it's not because of you, it's because you've also grown as a person. So why hold on to something that's not for your best interest? And sometimes it's hard. You know, you get used to a certain way of living and it's gotten you to this point, so why get rid of it now? But it's like pruning a plant.
Yeah, yeah.
I get rid
Come
of the
back
leaves
better.
sometimes, and then you're gonna
Yeah,
grow, grow, grow.
yeah,
So it's all
yeah.
part of the human experience.
It is. Morgan, I've so enjoyed this conversation. I have one final question for you.
Okay, let me have it.
And I, I always love to leave with something we can give the audience, right? So, what
Mm,
do you wish more social workers understood about creativity, imagination, or art as part of our work? Because I love how you called it Black interiority. So, bringing it back into ourselves.
mm-hmm. Hmm.
What do you wish they knew or understood?
Well, I think the very essence of our field is how inclusive and expansive it is. If you can imagine both of these existing at the same time, right? And art is all around us.
Mm,
And we may not recognize it as art, but the way that someone landscaped a park or a certain building, or you may hear the little jingle in the ice cream truck, or something that you may scroll on social media. Like it's all a form of expression. And everyone that you are encountering as a social worker, whether you're micro, macro, meso, whatever, they all have their own way of expressing themselves. Like everybody is a work of art themselves. And
yeah.
so I think the more that we embrace creativity in any discipline, in any practice, it allows us more opportunity to know what's possible. I mean, that's the whole purpose of art is just to twist our minds a little bit beyond what's right in front of us, what's already given. And so, who knows, a form of creativity could allow you the opportunity to learn something new, not just about the people that you're serving, but just new ways of thinking, of being and being in community with one another. I think creativity is how we've gotten any sort of invention and discovery throughout history, right? So it's not just visual art, which I am a visual artist, but the arts is all around us. It breathes, and I think it's going to be the thing that survives.
Oh, and isn't it always the thing that survives?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna let no AI take it. Like,
No, no. And
no.
I love how expansive you were about what creativity can be. Yes, you're a visual artist, but also giving social workers permission to use their unique expression of creativity
Hmm.
and bringing that into your work.
Yeah, I mean, back to when I was a school social worker in grad
Mm-hmm.
school, I did two things. I brought in art supplies
Mm-hmm.
and I had the students draw themselves an interpretation of during the civil rights movement, that I am a man um
Yeah,
protest
I
signs.
remember.
I
Mm-hmm.
had them write, I am blank. And they
Mm-hmm.
drew themselves as they said, I am a genius, or I am, and they used creativity to express themselves. And it was so beautiful because they don't have that opportunity. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing that I brought in were like little like meditation cubes and cards for them. So they were able to just and seeing their little beings just be for 2 seconds was it could have been the only chance they had all day to be able to do that. And so bringing in that creativity to school social work, which on the surface sounds like, oh Lord, come get these
These babies.
children, come get these babies. But just being able to see their own little humanity at the age of like 6 or 7 and doing so through creativity, it was like the perfect combination. And I didn't even have a blueprint. I was just like, what would I have wanted when I was 7? You know? And just let them have it. So be expansive, y'all. It's okay. You don't need to apologize for it. I think that's literally what our field allows us to be.
Yeah. I promise I'm going to let you go, but you keep dinging something. Creativity is so good for our brains through the human lifespan, and the fact that you did the brain work early in your career.
Yes.
And now, tapping into art and art, there's a whole book called Your Brain on Art,
Yes.
and how healthy, so I'm thinking even about our elders who are dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's, and art and music waking up those parts of the brain as well. So using your creativity, however you bring it to the table, is always going to be a healthy part of the treatment plan for our clients, whether it's micro, meso, or macro.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is. It's medicinal.
Love that word. Oh my goodness, Morgan. Thank you so much for spending this time with me.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for sharing not only your work, but the thinking and experiences behind it. How can our audience find you?
Yes. Well, you can go on Instagram and follow me at morgan.overton.art. My website is also morganovertonart.com. If you're in Pittsburgh, I'll probably walk down the street and you see me. That's how Pittsburgh functions. But yeah, I would love to just keep this energy and conversation going. So if anyone feels moved by it, definitely reach out.
Absolutely. And I will make sure that your links are in your podcast description box as well. And so to everyone who's listened, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Goddesses of Social Work podcast. I hope today's conversation leaves you thinking a little more expansively about what social work can look like, what creativity can make possible, and perhaps even what becomes available to us when struggle doesn't have to be the center of every story. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Goddesses of Social Work podcast. We are glad you were here. If you like this episode, please come back to hear more stories of the journeys through social work, and please leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. See you next time here on the Goddesses of Social Work podcast.